All right, guys, welcome to the Uncapped Poker Podcast with our guest today, Craig Hanlon, who has one of the most interesting stories in poker of how he ended up getting a career in poker and the journey that he went along to get there. Um, he went through a lot of personal problems, addiction, loss of career, and basically starting over fresh in his 40s. And he has a story of and a journey of hitting rock bottom and recovery, and truly blessed to call this man my friend and someone that I've been able to get to know. Um, and he's just such an interesting person. I think more people should hear his stories, um, from where he started to where he is and to who he might be able to help along the way. So, Craig, if you don't mind introducing yourself and um, maybe just starting from the beginning, like what happened to where did it start? What caused that rock bottom hit? And then how did you move forward basically starting over? How did you feel when basically you had to almost recreate your life, recreate your personality, and basically try to find purpose in life again?
Yeah, man. So what it was like, what happened, what my life is like now. Well, first let me say I love the intro and also blessed to be a friend of you and for you, Lucas. Last couple of years getting to know you guys been a big part of my life today. And as I'll describe in a minute, I lived my life for a long time unable and perhaps like really unwilling to truly connect with other people, in part because I wasn't willing to open myself up to that connection with others. And now that I make that a priority in my life, making good connections with other people is, yeah, one of the joys of my life today, being sober and playing poker. So, yeah, I like to give kind of like a TLDR, when people ask me, about my past. So I'm 46 years old now, and I was a lawyer from the time I was 24 until 39. I lived and worked primarily in New York City, and during that same time period, I was also an alcoholic and a cocaine addict. So, someone who operates that way, I was one of those kind of high functioning alcoholics and cocaine addicts. Very good at my job. I was mostly um, a litigator for all my career. So I was in court, practicing various forms of law. I was in prosecution early in my career. I did civil rights litigation. I did employment litigation and ended up doing family and divorce law. So all different kinds of law, always a litigator, always, dealing with cases that were contested in the courtroom in one way, shape, or another. Um, so during that same time, yeah, I was also an alcoholic and a cocaine addict. And, over the period of those 15 years, um, life gets progressively more difficult and difficult to handle. And my alcoholism and cocaine addiction got progressively and progressively worse. So the kind of long story short is over the last couple of years that I practiced, which was in 2017, 18, 19, I'd gotten fired from the last firm that I was working at doing divorce law in New York City. And that was primarily because of my behavior, always showing up late, not very kind to people in the office. That's what happens when you're constantly, withdrawing from cocaine and drinking alcohol. Just as a, description of how bad it was for me, I lived in the Bronx at that time, and my office was in Midtown Manhattan. And I think the natural, way to commute to work under those circumstances is you take the subway. Those who live in New York City, right? You just know, like, you take the subway. I chose to drive my car up and down the FDR in ridiculous traffic every morning and afternoon. And the only reason I did that is so that I could drink and snort coke in my commute to work back and forth. And it just made it convenient because you can't stand in a subway and drink a can of beer or snort a bag of cocaine. But if you're driving in your car, I was able to do that. And that's kind of how I was living at
It's
that
funny
time.
how addiction will drive our behaviors in that way
Yeah.
without even recognizing it. And
Every little choice, every decision is made, at least for me, that's how it was. It was made with the idea of like, when can I get high or drunk next? planning out my day, like, okay, this bathroom's here, this bathroom's there. I can sneak in there, snort some coke. I could drink this before I go there, drink this on my way here. Uh, so yeah, that's what life was like for me. And yeah, so during those last 2 years that I practiced, over the course of time, many of my behaviors and life choices, especially with respect to finances, were, just reckless. And so I just spent all my money, obviously, on alcohol and cocaine, and wasn't very responsible saving, investing, despite being in my mid 20s and 30s, prime time to be saving for the future. I wasn't. I was spending, much more of a instant gratification, person when it comes to money and finances. So I had a client that I was representing in a divorce case, two wealthy people who were getting divorced in Manhattan, and they sold a bunch of stock to continue to finance their divorce litigation. And 100,000 of that went into the escrow account that I was managing so that they could pay their taxes on that stock sale the next year. Well, I used that as my own personal piggy bank over the course of 5, 6 months, and over that time stole a total of about $75,000 from that escrow account. And that there's there's one scenario that kind of repeated itself over and over, almost like a Groundhog Day, where I would actually sometimes be taking the subway, back from work, and I would get off the train. I'd go to the bank that was right down the street from my apartment, transfer money from the escrow account to my personal account so that I can withdraw it, planning on going to meet my cocaine dealer later, paying whatever parking tickets I might have, whatever irresponsible, obligations I incurred. And the moment I would walk out of the bank, like in my head, I'm just freaking out, panic inside my body, heart racing, and I walked as fast as I could. It was only like 2 or 3 blocks, just in my head, like, okay, don't worry. Like tomorrow, I'm gonna get back to work. I'm gonna get some more clients. I'm gonna get some money. I'm gonna put this money back, and nobody's gonna know. And like I just repeated that over and over and over. And the panic, just from that moment of after I made the withdrawal, even while I was there, just like wondering if they're gonna figure out what was going on. And
Mm-hmm.
walking home, getting into my apartment, walking upstairs, I go straight to the kitchen, open the freezer, which I always kept a bottle of vodka, open the bottle, chug, chug, chug. And like for a moment, this wave of like relaxation just comes over me. Problems were gone. Felt this sense of ease and comfort. Okay, everything's gonna be okay now.
Mm-hmm.
And
Was that the first time you decided, like you made that decision to steal money from that account?
um, that happened. You know what? I don't know exactly when the first time I decided to do that, but the scenario I just described happened many times after making those
Mm-hmm.
transfers. Um, and yeah, so yeah, ultimately, that went on for a period of 5 or 6 months, and sooner or later they catch on. When you're doing something like that, I started getting knocks at my door and little business cards from the district attorney's prosecutor's office with being slid under my door. I remember a couple times, I didn't really go to sleep during these periods of times. I just like passed out on my couch ultimately at some point. And I remember being passed out on my couch and, bang, 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 bang on the door. And I kind of jumped up and froze and just tried not to
Mm-hmm.
move, tried not to breathe, didn't want them to know that I was in the room. I didn't know if they're going to come banging. And so I knew that they were, onto me. My client was calling me. I stopped responding to my client, stopped responding to other clients, stopped showing up in court, just pretty much started to disappear completely. Unable to face the truth of, the decisions I was making and the consequences it had on other people. So I don't
So
know
it's like all
exactly.
those things compiled up, and it was it was so hard to face because it's almost like you just kept running from everything internally and everything externally, and now it's finally like now it's almost getting to the point where you have to face it, and you just are reclusing even more and just continuing to shelter back and.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's exactly right. And just to give a physical description, so um, the car that I had at the time, I had gotten an extra, or I got like a new set of tires, and I bought them off someone. So the tires that I had, like I didn't have anything to do with them. So I'm living in an apartment in the Bronx in New York City, and I've got a set of 4 car tires in my apartment. And I used those basically to blockade the door, afraid that somebody's going to try to come in, afraid that somebody would see how I was living, to see this disgusting mess of where I live, to see me, that the police. And so I used these 4 tires to stack up inside the front door of my apartment building, thinking somehow that would like help prevent, and just another example of, like you described, Justin, of how I was just, avoiding facing, what was really going on. And
Do you remember how you felt at that time? Like,
yeah,
how did you feel as a person? Or, I mean, is it just like you were consistently numbing yourself where you weren't conscious of the way you were living, or just
no,
because it seems like blocking the door with tires, and like it almost seems like you were just continuing to add to the issue as opposed to like, oh, let me just like clean my apartment. Let me take some step forward towards progression. So I wonder like how I want to know how you were feeling or what you were thinking at that point in time.
yeah. So the words that come to my head when I hear you ask that question: shame, a lot of shame, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of guilt, a lot of fear. Those are like the primary ones that I felt. A lot of this like sinking feeling in my stomach. I remember multiple times just looking at myself in the bathroom mirror and crying, like
Mm-hmm.
unwilling to accept in like disbelief that this was what I had become.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was younger, always, very smart, kind of set aside, in terms of education, higher education programs. I went to college in an honors degree program, graduated with, a very high grade point average, had an honors degree, went to law school. I was president of the Student Bar Association when I was in law school. It's like the student government, also graduated like top third of the class there. It was
Mm-hmm.
kind of always meant to be someone very successful. In my first job, I worked for the New York City Law Department and received a promotion after 2 years to like the elite level where no one else had ever gotten to that particular division that fast. I was like a
Mm-hmm.
rising star in terms of a lawyer and a litigator there. And so always, like such high potential, supposed to be someone, right? Like that kind of career trajectory, and just self-destructed. And so, during these times, like I was very, very aware of that. And like physiologically, like the emotional experience I had was really intense. Like I said, looking at myself in the mirror, crying, unwilling to accept that this is, what had happened to me.
You
Um,
feel that expectation of, being that, young guy on the block, you're supposed to be, people see your ceiling as being very high in your career. Do you think that had something to do with you eventually finding, I guess, other outlets for your stress or problems that might have caused later on?
In my head, probably. As I look back now, no. I don't, because like the way I hear your question now, in my head, it's like, is it their fault? Because people expected much of me, and I expected much of myself that I couldn't handle it. No, it was me. I was unable to handle that. I was unable to handle the emotional experience that comes with having those expectations. Um, I was unwilling to admit when I couldn't do something, when I wasn't good at something. I hated the feeling I would get if I made a mistake
Mm-hmm.
and someone pointed it out to me. My response would be like, okay, okay, I know, I understand, I made a mistake. Just stop right there. Don't keep telling me anymore. I know I made the mistake. Let's just let it go. So, because I don't want to feel that way I felt, as uncomfortable as it felt. And that's kind of looking back at it now. That's how it kept getting worse and worse. I never was willing or able to accept and just feel what it felt like when I made a mistake, when I failed to live up to expectations. And if I look back now, it's, I don't think about this now, but like, yeah, if I were able and willing to accept how I felt when I made a mistake and move forward from there, I wouldn't have ended up doing what I did, which, like you described, Justin, is just, like kind of hiding, and avoiding facing the truth, right? And then that just kind of snowballed. So,
I wonder like thinking about how this snowballed and describing, I guess, the success you had in your life up to that point. Did you think, was there almost a feeling like when you were in college having the success, or when you were younger in your career having your success, did you almost, were those internal issues there, but did you think the external success was going to solve the internal battle to
yeah,
an extent?
yeah. So, and I think it's important that I add this, kind of other component, for like the first part of my life. So, what you asked me now in terms of like those early years, like I felt like a fraud as I was
Hmm.
starting to have a success. Like I was doing well in college and law school and early career. I felt like I was a fraud. And the
Hmm.
reason is, the whole cycle I went through of drinking and addiction, that started in my youth. And I had gone to a rehab when I was 16 years old, inpatient, 9 months. And when
Wow.
I got out, I stayed sober for a short period of time. And I ended up, let's see, I started drinking again maybe in college. First year, I joined a fraternity and I started thinking, like, hey, I'm okay. Like, I used to do drugs when I was a kid, smoke weed and do cocaine and crack cocaine and all this kind of stuff. But like alcohol, like that's normal. I just want to be normal. I just want to be a normal person, drink some beers, and everything's okay. And
So just to rewind real quick, because this is crucial information.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I somehow forgot about this, or we didn't talk about it.
yeah.
Um, how did you, how did you land? So what was the journey of landing in rehab at 16 years old? Because
Yeah.
that's
Let's see. So yeah, the quick summary of that be like I started getting high and drinking maybe when I was like 12 or something, 13, like
wow.
middle school. Actually, I remember one time I snuck out in the woods with some friends and we like everybody like brought some beer or alcohol bottle or like from their house. We like met in the woods, like we're like drinking like like you drink like a beer and a half and you're drunk at 12. And I loved the way that felt.
Hmm.
So I go home with my book bag that night with, some beer cans in it, and I bring that same book bag to school the next day. The
Okay.
seventh grade or eighth grade. And I think I'm so clever. At lunch taking the milk carton off the table, underneath the table, pouring alcohol into the little milk carton, thinking that the lunch lady right over there doesn't see me. I'm drinking it. And yeah, so that didn't end up well. So I went to my first rehab. It was like a 14-day rehab. And well, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember this, but like, were you around when O.J. Simpson, like, was driving the white Bronco down the road and everything? Like, that was the time period when I was in this 14-day rehab because I remember that happened when I was in there. So
What year was that? I would,
that was,
Lucas definitely wasn't born.
let's see.
I
That
So
was
think
the
I was,
90s, right? Was it 93?
yeah, it must have been right around there because
I
I was
wasn't
born
born yet.
79, so like 92, 93, 94, one of those years. I don't remember if I was 14, 15,
Hmm.
16, something like that. I was a freshman in high school, I remember, because I remember I was in the middle of my biology exam, and the principal came knocking on the door with the dean or something, like whoever's like in charge, and they pulled me out of the biology exam and took me downstairs. My parents were there, and they drove me off to a rehab. I lived in New Jersey at the time, went to Pennsylvania, yeah, and that was kind of the start of it. So and then similar,
Wow.
just kind of repeating that behavior for the next couple of years ended me up in the rehab, that you asked about when I was 16. And so, yeah, so from the time period when I was in my early 20s, or late teens, early 20s in college, law school, like I felt like a fraud because I pretended to everybody I was sober. And in fact, the rehab I went to, um, I used to go back to that rehab over the next couple of years and speak to the kids that were there at the time and share my story of like, hey, I'm sober now, and like you can do it too, and look at me, I'm in college and law school and like all these great things. And in fact, when I was in law school, I got an internship after my first semester at the United States District Attorney's Office in New Jersey. And at that time, the head prosecutor was Chris Christie, who later became to be the governor of New Jersey. He was connected with that rehab I went to when he was younger. He was someone who kind of sponsored it and, helped, get it funding from the state when he was, a community legislator. So he and I became friends, such that later on, when he became governor, and one year he was doing the State of the State speech,
I saw this.
he
You were
invited me.
drunk then. You were drunk at that.
He,
You were drunk when he made that, right? And
yeah,
you were on screen. He's like,
yeah,
Craig sober for this or something.
yeah, because he, had this program that he created as governor in the state of New Jersey called Drug Court, to help people who were committed of like low-level drug crimes, smoking marijuana and stuff like that, focus on getting them rehabilitation instead of punitive and jail. And he used me as an example, saying, look, this young man like got the opportunity for rehabilitation. Then he went to law school. Now he's a lawyer, and let's have him stand up, in the middle of the whole legislature. And I gave him a hug. And the truth of the matter is that day, as I was driving there, similar to all those days I drove to work, I was drinking alcohol and snorting cocaine on the way to that ceremony. Standing up there saying, "Look at me, I'm a role model of being sober," and I wasn't. And I wasn't. And so, that was part of the guilt and shame that was eating at me all those years. Pretending to other people to be sober, and then in my own private life, drinking and getting high, and like almost trying to live two separate lives.
Yeah, it's almost. I mean, it's like you can't run from that. Like no, no, like you could fake being another person, but then you have to go home and live with that. You have to look yourself in the mirror. It's probably why it's very difficult to look yourself in the mirror at times without crying, because
Yeah.
you were almost presenting not what was actually going on, and you were trying so hard to. I mean, I guess I don't want to speak for you, but it almost seems like, you know, you were trying to just mask everything that was going on and basically trying to say, okay, this is going okay in the outside world and this is working, so this is fine. But that can only work for so long, right? It's almost like validating the addictive behavior with the success that you're having in the outside world, but it just will always catch up to you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So bring us to the point now, going back to the point where you had taken the funds. So then what happens after that, right? You told us you were hearing knocks on the door. How did that ultimately end up? And yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, like I described, as far as standing in the bathroom, looking myself in the mirror and crying, and yeah, I obviously, like I described, like I sense the walls caving in. I know they're after me. I'm aware that I'm not doing anything to show up at work and whatnot. One day I go to transfer more money, and the account's frozen, and I literally have no other money anywhere. Credit cards maxed out, no money. I'm 39 years old. I'm living in this apartment that's filthy, unhealthy. I haven't shown up to work. I have no way of stealing any more money. Like, that's it. I'm done. Like, I'm dead. And I remember just going back to my apartment and crying. And first time in my life, like at that moment was the first time in life I picked up the phone and I called somebody. And the gentleman I called was someone who was the director of that rehab many years ago that I went to when I was 16. It's 23 years later. Someone who I also faked my life to during that same time where I appeared with the governor at the State of the State. I was also now, or at that time, on the board of directors of this rehab. Again, showing up to their board meetings drunk, but they didn't know, you know. And so, the gentleman who was the director of that facility, I reached out to him. I hadn't spoken to him in a couple of years. And remember, it was a Saturday or Sunday. It was definitely a weekend. And I picked up the phone. I called him. I remember he was on the golf course. And he said, "Craig, wow, so great to hear from you. I'm on the golf course. What's going on?" Like, as if he knew something was off, that I was calling him on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. We haven't spoken in years. I always get a little choked up when I like remember this moment. And for the first time, I said, I said, "Jimmy," I said, "I need help." And like never in my life had I said to someone else out loud, "I need help." And he said, "Okay, okay, buddy." And he just took the time to talk to me, and I just quickly spilled the beans. I told him what was going on. And he said, "Okay, I'm going to find your program. This is what you're going to do." And we're blah, 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 blah. So, that's what started it. I was living in the Bronx at the time, and I called my mom. I told her what was going on. I called my dad. I told him what was going on, and made a plan to leave New York, go down to South Jersey to stay with my mom for a period of time, to start going to an outpatient rehab, and to get a lawyer because, something was going to come down, sooner or later. And so that's the plan we set in motion. And as I went down to New Jersey one day, my mom came to pick me up. My mom, my stepdad, we drove down, we cleaned out my apartment in the Bronx, drove down to New Jersey. We're eating dinner that same night. And while we're eating dinner, knock on the door. And as soon as the knock happens on the door, I was like, yeah, that's time to go. And so they had, tracked me driving down there through the GPS or whatnot, and contacted the local authorities, and they picked me up, brought me to, like executed the arrest warrant that they had for me, brought me to jail down there. And that's what started. So I was very fortunate. I spent 9 days, down in jail in New Jersey, and then up in Manhattan at the detention center before appearing in court. was released on bail and got a lawyer and ultimately like pled guilty. Obviously I'm not there to have a trial or lie. I mean, all the evidence is right there, and I'd reached a stage for the first time in my life that I was willing to admit what was going on. I was willing to kind of take the first step that people talk about 12-step programs, which we get to next, of admitting being powerless over alcohol and drugs. My life was unmanageable, and I was ready to get help. And so the case went pretty quick because I'd never committed any crimes in my life prior to that. My lawyer was able to work out a deal with the prosecutors. Instead of serving 5 to 15 years in jail, which was the sentence for that kind of crime, theft of that amount of money in New York is a B felony or C felony, I think. They gave me a 2-year probation period and continue the outpatient therapy that I was getting, to get sober. So that's how
Were
that.
you willing to like, knowing what you were facing, were you willing to like, did part of you have to accept like, okay, I might do jail time, I might do some like serious time, like if you got did or did you think like, okay, like this is probably gonna get worked out, or was part of you scared about
Yeah,
the
yeah.
potential of that?
I'll the words that are coming to my mind are desperate,
Mm-hmm.
scared, um, willing to do whatever it takes to not go to jail. I
Mm-hmm.
did not want to go to jail. Like
Mm-hmm.
um, at the same time as I hear you ask that question, like, did I think it would work out? Yeah. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like somehow that was a common thread of mine, and it was part of why I continue to kind of self-destruct is like I always had this thought in my head, like, all right, I'm gonna fuck up today, but don't worry, I can fix it tomorrow. It'll get
Mm-hmm.
better tomorrow. I'm gonna spend all this money today, but I'll make money tomorrow. I'm gonna self-destruct this way today, but tomorrow it'll be fine. And so maybe it was just like some unwillingness to accept reality, but you know, I believed it was going to somehow be okay, and I was willing to do whatever it takes, to make it okay.
Mm-hmm. Um, so now that we're at this part of your story, right? Like that's behind you, and now, well, not totally behind you, but now you're focused on what's next, and you're obviously can't practice law anymore. So that identity's kind of gone. You're kind of at like baseline. You're a clean slate.
Yeah,
And I'm so curious because I don't think we've ever talked about this. Or maybe we did, but I just don't remember. But like how did like you get drawn towards like poker?
Hmm.
What was the draw to be like, okay, I'm gonna, because it's so crazy to me. It's not like, all right, like I'm gonna go do this now and just live a cool, clean life. It's like, okay, I'm gonna dive into poker 100% as this 40-year-old trying to restart life.
Yeah, yeah. So a couple things to kind of give background to answer that question. So number one, like once clean slate happens, like yeah. So I got the papers from the ethics committee, and got disbarred as a lawyer in the state of New York, and so that's how I lost my license. And was living with my mom, my stepdad down in South Jersey, and so like need to start working. Got a job doing like landscaping, and then started doing DoorDash. This is right during the COVID time, so that's like how I started. So that's like where rebuilding my life started, right? Like I've got
Mm-hmm.
a felony criminal record, and I'm not going to get, obviously I can't practice law. I had no more interest in practicing law, but I can't even get like a regular job. If I tried getting a job like at Amazon, and like nobody's going to
Mm-hmm.
hire me with that record, especially like having theft of you know property from someone else. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's where like life started. And so another piece of background is years ago, maybe I mean, like I played poker recreationally online many years ago
Mm-hmm.
in like the moneymaker era, right? Like that's kind of what originally got me attracted to poker. I remember winning an online tournament, made like $7,000, and used that
Wow.
money to go to the Giants Super Bowl victory over the undefeated Patriots that season. I was there with my brother, funded by an online poker tournament victory out in Arizona. And so, like, I had played poker years ago recreationally. I was a fish, playing tournaments, getting lucky, playing cash games, getting wrecked. And also, so like during that time where I was like spiraling out of control, one of the ways that I tried to make some more money was playing poker. And this was at a
Hmm.
time where, after Black Friday occurred, so online poker was still illegal, in New York or whatever, but I guess it came back in New Jersey. So I'm living in New York, but I knew that poker was okay in New Jersey. I would drive to New Jersey and sit in a parking lot with a laptop in my car, like drinking and snorting coke and like playing online poker. Like during those years where I was really fucked
It's
up.
a
Like,
funny image.
yeah. I don't know if I like really told you the details of that part. So like there was like, through the years, there was, like I just really enjoyed playing poker. Never studied or like learned anything. I was just making shit up, right? Um, and yeah, so like if I won money, on a particular night, like that would fund my cocaine binge the next few days, right? If I lost money, like now I, had to go make money somewhere else. So, so now it's like having like
So you
knowing
were
those two.
you were playing poker to make cocaine money?
Yeah.
Was that the?
Like
Oh
I'd pay
man.
like 25 cent, 50 cent, NL. Like I was one of those fish that like then if I like double up a couple times, oh, I go to like 200 NL. I double up. Oh, back then they had 2-4, like they had 2-4 on like Party Poker New Jersey or something, like, and I would play that and just like, try to run it up and then withdraw it. They had this like debit card you could withdraw it to and then like get the money right away and I go buy my cocaine. I mean, it was great. When it worked.
Did you think of like the money as cocaine while you're playing? So like if you won $50, you're like, oh, that's a bag right there or something.
To some extent,
Right?
yeah. To some extent, yeah. I definitely did. Definitely correlated that with exactly what I was gonna be getting later that night. Well, like when I ran out, like I'd go to like, and if I had a losing session and I finished all the cocaine while I was playing and I lost all my money that night, like man, I felt like shit for days. Felt like shit for days. So
It's not
yeah,
a
so
good
like
way to
having
live.
that background, like I had poker in my background, I knew of it. So now fast forward, right? So I'm just starting life over, and I can't answer the exact question of like what was the first trigger, but somehow the thought popped in my head of like, wait a second, I got some money in an online poker site somewhere, and I live in New Jersey right now. Yeah, let me log back in and figure this and get that. And sure enough, I don't remember how I did it, but like I got my password again. I logged back into Party Poker or yeah, it's probably Party Poker or Borgata MGM, like whatever that was called. And yeah, I had some money in there. And I was like, cool, like something to do for fun and maybe make some extra money while I'm door dashing and landscaping and living at my mom's at fucking 40 years old. Like I need to start doing something. So that's where that started. Um, and from there, then I just like had the idea. So like my mindset at this point where I'm, 39, 40 years old, this is in the COVID time, 2019, because that's when this happened, when I got arrested was March 2019. Um, and so like later on this year, as I'm like living on my mom's, doing this work and starting to play poker, I'm starting to think like, okay, like what am I going to do with myself? Like, what's my future going to be like? I need some kind of job or career where it's not, like boxed in where I need to apply and get a job because like that's just not going to happen. Like that's not happening for me. I can't go get a job somewhere because of my background. That already started to show itself. And the thought popped in my head like, wow, if I could learn how to play poker, like I don't have a boss. Like I can make my own money. I can be my own boss. And like those ideas sounded really good to me. The idea of like freedom and doing what I want when I want. And so that all combined to start to then look into it and like can you play poker full time and like make a living off it. And yeah, so that's how that all started. And I think the first couple things that I stumbled into was the pokercoaching.com website and Jonathan Little's thing, and I started there.
It's
um
funny, it's almost where everyone starts is
yeah,
pokercoaching.com. Everyone's like, yeah, I stumbled on that first,
yeah,
and then it
yeah.
like snowballs from there.
Hmm.
But it's a great starting point. Yeah, that's such a draw is the freedom that poker brings, and I think there's a lot of similar qualities that people enjoy as from other professionals that I've met, where it's the competitiveness, the strategy,
Hmm.
um, the and the freedom that it brings. I think is definitely like a huge thing for me. Not having every time I worked a job, I always had problems with like the authority of the job and like you have to work here, you have to work there, and you have to text them if you want time off. I always find it like just, I think one of the most attractive things that this is as a career is like I can go on a vacation any day of the week.
Mhm.
I can make my own personal life choices without having to answer to anybody but myself. And then you have to learn how to take responsibility in this field for sure. And that's something that you learn on the journey, I'm sure, as you know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think as I grew, one of the things I learned, I mean, like this came from a quote somewhere, like the initial phases of, wanting freedom. Yeah, it's like, oh, nobody can tell me what to do. I get to do it my way, you know.
Hmm.
And that's all good. That might be, kind of get you by for a while. But um, the more I came to realize, like, freedom is the opportunity to discipline yourself,
Yep.
and like true freedom doesn't exist unless you can have self-discipline. And that's something I always lacked, always lacked. And so it
Hmm.
became an opportunity for me to learn how to discipline myself. If I'm going to get what I want, from having poker as a career and being able to, show up when I want, work, or play poker when I want, study when I want, I'll need to discipline myself, and be able to also say no to this or that,
Hmm.
right? Like other temptations, to be aware of when I'm being lazy and procrastinating, and anything like that. So, with the freedom, comes, like you said, the word responsibility, and I also like that quote I found somewhere. I don't remember who said it, but yeah, freedom is the opportunity to discipline yourself.
So during this time period, HP, right, you're getting back on your feet, you're sobering up, you're going through that process. You're also trying to find sort of any gig, right? You're landscaping, you're doing DoorDash, Uber Eats, and this is also during COVID, right? And so
Hmm.
poker was one of those things. Where did you start off? What stakes did you start off at? And like, what did you feel like your progression was like? Do you think when you started, you should have even been playing at those stakes? Do you think, do you think
Yeah.
like, yeah, what was that like in terms of like the stakes you played, your ability, and how you eventually did get better at the game?
Yeah, I started at 100 NL, and like 200, like that's what I just started playing. Like, okay, 100 NL, like that sounds good. I don't know exactly, I can't recall like why I chose that. Like 25 cent, 50 cent, like in my mind just sounded too low, if I was going to start making money. And so, yeah, 100 and 200, and I sucked. I don't know what the hell I was doing. I was just making stuff up. And yeah, and I had a little bit of money. I remember I had like $5,000, and I got like a laptop and like something like I got a laptop. I got a 1 year subscription for poker coaching and like $3,000 bankroll. I'm like, all right, this is gonna start my poker career. Like so that like that's what I start with. And I'm playing 100 and 200 NL, and I'm a fish. Like that's where it started. Um, and yeah,
That's not that much money for 200.
no, no. It was up and down, up and down. At least I had a job though. I had also like
That's
so
good, yeah.
some extra something interesting. So I had left. I moved out at this time. So it's like end of 2019, early 2020, and I left. I was living at my mom and stepdad's at that point, and I left. With the help of a friend of mine, and I got a place at a facility that is consider it like a campground slash retreat center. Like people go to have like spiritual retreats, at this place. And there's, some like cabins and almost like hotel type rooms. And, it's out in the woods. There's a campground attached to it. This is down in South Jersey. And so I got a job there as a groundskeeper, kind of caretaker of the facility. And the way that worked is there was three of us in that role. And in exchange, like you worked there 3 days a week, one week and the next day two, like for the whole day, like a 12-hour shift or whatever. Like you were on call, so you can't leave. You got to be there, and you have these tasks. In exchange for that, like you get this tiny little room, and you live there, so you don't pay rent, you don't pay electric and gas and all this kind of stuff, and they give you a little stipend with a like a card gift card to ShopRite, like $200 ShopRite gift card for the grocery store once a month, and like free, room. So while doing that, trying to make some money from poker, making money DoorDash and landscaping, my plan was okay, got no expenses, minimal expenses. That's how I'm able, that's my plan to, play poker, and I'll be okay if I lose money because, I'm not spending any money and I can make money DoorDash and landscaping and whatnot. And, so that's how it was. And yeah, so I started with poker coaching, and one of the coaches that I had seen on one of the videos, I liked the way that he was talking about learning and studying, and I found his site called Chasing Poker Greatness and started by learning pre-flop. It was a pre-flop boot camp was what it was called, and that was the start. That was in like 2020, I want to say. Pretty sure that's when it was. Might have been 2021. I think it was 2020. And yeah, so that's like the start of when I finally started to like study poker, just starting with the basics and learning pre-flop and going from there. So
How did your family react? Like, okay, so you're kind of, did you talk because you have a son and you have, you know, now your family who's involved in your life, right? You were kind of came back to them for support, and so did you tell them like obviously the idea clicked in your head like, oh, what if I can do poker, right? Did you I'm sure it's kind of something that obviously most people don't understand when you first talk to them about it.
yeah,
So I'm curious about how that went. Do they
yeah,
just trust you?
yeah. A couple things. So when I started to take it seriously, like study and learn, and get to a point where I was willing to say like, hey, this is the idea that I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And justify it a little bit by saying, look, like I don't have many other realistic options. My family sometimes like, oh, like have you considered getting a job? And I remember my response to that was always like, oh, you mean just like go to the grocery store and pick one off the shelf? I never thought about that. I didn't realize it was that easy. Like, hi, I've got a felony criminal record. I've applied several places and they all said, no, get out of here. So what job are you talking about? Right? Like, how do I just get a job? It's not that easy. And I had, jobs, landscaping and DoorDash, which were like means to make income. Like I was doing things in the world and receiving money, right? So like in that respect, I had a job
Mm-hmm.
and I had a plan. And as I slowly started to share that idea with my family of like, yeah, I'm thinking about like playing poker and making that, the initial response I kind of was like, oh yeah, that's cool, but like as long as you're focusing on also getting a job, like that's just like a hobby. I don't think they really understood
Right, right.
at first. Yeah, so there wasn't like an outright rejection, but it was almost like a poo-pooing it of like, oh, you good little boy, you play your poker on the side, like
Right, right. Yeah.
so. Yeah, it wasn't really
I
a problem, for my family. Yeah.
oh, I forgot what I was gonna ask. Um, Lucas, you have any questions?
Yeah, so you're playing online poker. I'm sure you start tracking your results, right? You get PT4, HM3, whatever tracker you start using. Were you able at the start, right? You were still a fish, but you were trying to improve. Were you able to actually end up having results? What were the results like? Were you did you downswing at first? What was that like?
So I could probably pull them up and like double check, but to my recollection, once I started studying, just like basic, it like I think I had a pretty big upswing like pretty quickly. And that was, what solidified the idea for me, like, wow, I can make this much money in a month. Holy shit. Like that started then, you know, building upon this idea of, okay, like if the next, like, let's say 18 months, I stay living in this tiny little room, and doing this kind of very hermit lifestyle, and I'm just here doing the stuff, a little DoorDash, and I build up this poker bankroll. Wow. In 18 months, I'll have plenty of money. I go get an apartment. I'm out in the world. I do this full time and like, bang, bang, it'd be easy. I just take this one month
Easy.
of great results and repeat it every month, right? It's just like, that's how it goes. And
Lucas
that
talks
was,
about this often, by the way. He says most pros start on an upswing. Like if you start your poker journey in a downswing, most of those people you probably never see because they're just like, this is horrible.
yeah.
But then like, yeah, the downswing eventually comes for us all, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I think
but
in poker there's a lot of survivorship bias where a
Yeah.
lot of the time the people who are in it initially have an upswing because all the guys who went on, and this is true for cash and tournaments, a lot, mainly for tournaments though, because tournaments has a lot more variance. But if you start on a downswing, you either think you're a fish and you're not profitable, or you just don't have the funds to keep doing this, right?
Right.
So, and you just quit. Whereas, like, if you make that first big score, or you have a really good month in cash games, you're like, oh wow, this is like really easy, and
Hmm.
you might be a fish or losing player, or even like slightly losing player at that time. And then it's only once you hit the downswing after the upswing where you're generally like, okay, well, hold on, let's start studying. Something's not going right.
All
So
right.
I think there definitely is a lot of that, but um, I think in your case it was for the better, right? You sought out um, trying to improve your play um, in coaching. I think that's something that's actually very difficult. When you're on an upswing, it's very easy to just want to keep playing because
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
a positive feedback loop, right? You're like, oh, I have this win rate, and all I have to do is just keep playing, right? I mean, I'm winning so much, and sometimes it's easy to lose focus of like the actual studying and improving your game aspect of it.
Yeah, just like I said,
That's
just like
true.
you know, take the most recent results and just assume those will keep repeating, right? That's just why like the original losers assume, oh, that's how it's always going to be. The original winners, oh, that's how it's always going to be. And yeah, it was pretty much that easy, like in my mind, to justify, okay, this is how it's going to be. Like, look, I'm going to make this much money, and that's how I started calculating. Wow, in a year and a half, I'm going to have this much money saved up. Bang! So I just take this much and multiply it by that, and these were, and looking back, yeah, like that's definitely like the survivorship bias or like the, kind of beginner's fallacy. I'm grateful I got to experience that in that way because had I not experienced that, had I had the original downswing to start, would not be here today. Like had I blown through that first $3,000 I had and lost it, probably wouldn't be here today. Um,
So, where you are now, right? Like you play live poker full time almost exclusively, but you
mhm,
started off almost exclusively online.
mhm.
Um, so you probably can compare the two very well and the different lifestyles both of those brings because you dove deep into both of those lifestyles. First, strictly online, then next, strictly live, traveling to the casino and staying overnight and putting in days and days of work outside of your home. Um, what was what was that journey from the online streets, finding success there, and then transitioning into live poker? What were those differences professionally? What were those differences from a mental game aspect? And what were those differences on a gratification and personal scale?
Yeah, so I guess to answer the first part of the question, like the differences in the game, so much different, like almost like learning a new game, almost like
Mm-hmm.
learning a new game. Yeah, so I ended up, playing online 100, 200, some 500 full time for about 2 years and had a lot of success there. Um, and thanks to you, the two of you encouraging me to try live poker, I gave it a shot, unwillingly at first, very hesitant at first, very awkward at first, but quickly
Real quick, let
felt,
me interrupt. You
yeah,
were stacking.
you got to tell me the
I brought you
story.
to the casino to play 2-5 for the first time, and Lucas, he had a pile of chips in front of him, all stacked in fours, so he would know each one. This was $100, this was $25, and he would. I was like so embarrassed for him, but I'm like, well, we'll figure it out. Let him do his thing. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was kind of like a live fish basically when I showed up, despite being like an online pro. I was a live fish.
Mm-hmm.
Very different. But yeah, so like there was to me a lot of like almost learning a new game, and I approached it that way. The same way when I first started learning, the basics of online poker and pre-flop ranges and things like that. I did the same
Mm-hmm.
thing, with live poker, and I got connected with a coaching group, and that was focused on like learning how to beat low stakes live poker because I thought that would be really helpful, and I didn't want to just take what I knew from playing online. I was able to recognize, like, to me, obviously the structural differences in the game: six-handed versus eight-handed, 100 big blinds, 200 big blinds. A lot of different things going on that I thought just at a very basic level would result in different strategic adjustments. And so, while I'm busy, in my mind, focusing on that early on, what happened emotionally and just experientially was falling in love with the whole atmosphere of live poker, of being at the table with other people. So many things I heard people say, oh, live poker's so slow. Oh, live poker's so boring. Live poker, blah, blah, blah. Especially coming from people who have played six max online, MTTs online, multi-tabling, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 tables online. It sounded like that was going to be the experience. And I personally had the opposite. I think there's a lot going on in live poker. I think the speed of the game, sure, sometimes, like you're just sitting around, watching two guys in a pot, but so often, if you're diligent about what's going on, there's plenty to watch and learn and data to collect, for your own, strategy later on. And, you know, for me, I've become very friendly and very outgoing, almost like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like the opposite of what I used to be when I was drinking and using drugs, and very, kind of reclusive and not connecting with others. So, I had a really great experience when I started playing live poker and just fell in love with, for lack of a better term, like the social environment, being there at the casino, surrounded by people, even little things, if I think about, if I close my eyes and imagine myself sitting here at the desk where I would play online poker, there's no sounds. There's nothing happening except the beep, 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 time bank here and click, 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 and bank, boop, boop, boop. Like that's it. Unless
Yeah.
I put, sometimes I put this like tranquil scene on YouTube and the TV in the back with some like white noise or a waterfall. Like there's nothing going on. It's a very sterile environment, by
Mhm.
myself playing online poker. And then step into a casino, sit at the live poker table, close your eyes for a second, and just focus on what you hear. Floor, chips shuffling, high hand, ah man, I put him on ace king, bomb pot, like all these sounds, like, and the laughing and the talking and the yelling and, just like everything that's happening, there's just so much more. And there's a lot of stimulation, in the environment. And so I like that. I like to be
Mhm.
immersed in an environment where there's stuff going on and there's other people around. And yeah, so I fell in love with the experience of live poker and happened pretty quick.
Yeah, you're very social at the table,
Yeah.
and you're great at meeting new people. And I think one of the qualities that you have that is so good is your vulnerability. I think people, I was listening to something the other day. Uh, Actually, I was listening to my brother's podcast, who's talking to a retired police officer who dealt with a bunch of suicide attempts and all of these things because of he was involved in a shooting that caused a lot of PTSD. And he said, I never related to people when I hid the the bad parts of myself or the parts that I didn't want to talk about. I never related to people when I was like, oh, I won a trophy for this or I was successful in this. Said I always related to people when I opened my heart and said, oh yeah, I had a gun pointed to my head and almost pulled the trigger. I think people can calm down um, and really relate to you and are interested in you because you'll sit down and be like, oh, yeah, I almost went to jail for 10 years and I stole X amount of money and I was an addict, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
interesting and it's really courageous. And yeah, I give you a lot of credit on that side of your recovery. I think you needed to be that open because I think you were so. I mean, hearing your story, it was almost like you were playing two characters in a movie all the time. And so your willingness to open up and just completely be yourself and honest, it created this new it kind of created your identity to a degree um, from a social standpoint. And then from I think a live poker standpoint and why you love it so much is because getting to know you, you're the way you operate and the way your brain works is you are so detail oriented. Like you can analyze things to just sometimes to your own detriment, but you can dive so deep in a spot or in like the way someone's shuffling their chips or the way their behavior changed. Like you just pick up on every single little detail, and your brain operates at a level that like most people's doesn't. Um, and so that's definitely been it's definitely been interesting because yeah, you'll call me to tell me about hands. I'll need you to repeat it like 3 or 4 times, just
Yeah.
because like yeah, you're always thinking about things that most people aren't in particular spots. So
Yeah,
um
in live
yeah.
poker, there's so many more, call them data points to collect, to
Hmm.
perceive, and then put into that, calculator. And sometimes it might just end up being one or two that become the deciding factor. And there's a couple of hands that I'm always going to remember. One that happened early on, where without going through the details of the hand, I end up facing an all-in situation. I have a strong hand,
Hmm.
but I have a bluff catcher, and I'm going through the calculation. Okay, pre-flop, this happened, and blah blah blah, and the bet size, and this and that. And I'm at the live poker, and I stand up and take a deep breath. I just kind of make a sound, and I'm just trying to like get present in that
Hmm.
moment. And as I'm doing that, like something dawned on me that
Hmm.
the player I'm up against now, like he was the original raisers, call, call, call. I'm in the big blind and I squeeze. And at that very moment that I squeezed, I remember the guy whiplashed his head right at me, had these
Hmm.
piercing eyes, like almost like disbelief and anger, was his emotion. That's not
Hmm.
somebody who's got the nuts. That's somebody like,
Right.
the fuck? You bluffing me? I don't mean to curse, but like that's the sense
No,
I
that's
got,
fine.
and like because I was able to just be present there in that
Yeah.
moment, like I can't collect that information online. Sure, I have a lot of other data points I use online and equal a strategy I might,
Hmm.
decision I might make, but like live, there's other stuff happening. And like the way he physically reacted, that emotional energy, and he was sitting right next to me, that's when I knew. I was like, oh, okay, I call. He says, you're good. I said, okay. Like, you know, so those things I love. I love those moments. I had another hand not too long ago. That was one of the first hands, playing live poker, a big hand where that came into play. And, something else, happened recently where, I'm bluffing the turn. I'm the original raiser. I see bet the flop. The guy check calls. I bluff the turn, and I'm planning, when he calls to bluff the river. And when he called, there was just this tiny little on the side of his mouth, little. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, he got the nuts, don't he? He's got the nuts. And he checks the river. I was like, show me the nuts. He's like, yep. And so just those little things, like being able to physically be there in that environment and being present and
Yeah.
aware of what's going on, I can sense that. And I love that. I love that shit, sometimes it might be misinformation. Maybe if somebody's deliberately doing something, right? That might happen too. Or I over prioritize, something. But I love that. I love that about live poker.
Yeah, live poker, I think storytelling
Yeah.
is a big factor. I
Mm-hmm.
think, and in your previous life, you were a litigator, so that was, in essence, your job, right? Your job is to tell a
Yeah.
story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in live poker, I think it's very, like, important to make sure it makes sense, especially against someone who's, a reg. And if you're in a reg on reg battle, if your story doesn't check out, everything from like the way you actually played the hands, the details of the actual hand, to like the way you composed yourself when you were playing the hand, right? Like a lot of, and I think online poker you get that, but you don't get the physical tells. You don't get their composure. You don't have the guy if he jams. You don't get to look at stare him down for like 30 seconds, see how he's acting. You don't get any of that. And I think in online poker too, what happens is you can play multiple tables. So you may not be present in that very moment. You're just like, oh, I have a good hand here. I have two pair, I call, right? Whereas like if you and then you review later a hand and you're like, well, hold on, like what does he have here? What is he repping? Do I have value or is this a bluff catcher, right? So I think live poker does the storytelling aspect is very very important. I think more so than online. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Big time.
Um. So now you're a live poker guy, right?
Yeah.
You're enjoying uh all the action that comes with live poker. do you think that what do you see yourself going from here? Right? You know, you're playing 2-5, mixing in 5-10. Where do you kind of what are your goals, I guess, for the upcoming year? Where do you see yourself at, hopefully?
Yeah, so there's a combination of things for now and in the future. So simple goals for right now is just like continue to improve um, at 2-5 and then play 5-10 regularly, if not full time. And I say that just because the extent to which 5-10 games are available where I play regularly. So from a poker and point of view and like stakes, that's a simple goal. Um, for now. And for in the future, combining poker and, like my life experience, I want to take a step back and add something into the whole conversation that, we didn't really integrate yet, but one of the the foundation for my recovery was the 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous. When I first started to get sober, I've been sober 6.5 years, almost 7 years now. April 21st,
Easy.
2019, last time I had a drink or a drug. So that was the foundation of me getting sober. And like one of like the core principles there for people who are in the program is to share your experience, your strength, your hope, so that you can help another alcoholic to recover and get sober. And by doing that, that helps me stay sober. And so, I do this often just organically at the poker table. Somehow, people ask me, so, just like normal chit chat at the poker table, what do you do for a living? I just point to the poker table. I said, this is what I do, oh, really? What'd you used to do? Oh, well, you want to hear that story, And I give them the TLDR of, what we talked about earlier. I used to be a lawyer, and then I was an alcoholic, and I got sober, I got disbarred, etc. And very often that's led to, these like micro opportunities of connecting with someone. Um, those of us who are in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a little kind of not a code word. I mean, it's it's a public, it's known in the public of, are you a friend of Bill? If you're a friend of Bill, it's kind of like the secret way of like saying to someone in public, like, hey, me too. I'm also an alcoholic, but we don't just run around and say it about other people. It's okay for me to say I am, publicly to anyone, but like for example, if you were, I'm not going to tell anybody you are. Right. But, I've had these micro opportunities of people saying, hey, friend of Bill. I say, yeah, all right, cool. Make friends that way, or, recently I just had somebody, say to me directly at the poker table, man, I could use your help. Like, I think I have a problem. Like, to me, that's like, that's the best part of my life. I get to share my experience, and just by living my life, someone comes to me and says, hey, can you help me? Because I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't go to a meeting and listen to other people, stand up and say, hey, I'm Bob, an alcoholic. Here's what I used to be like. This is what happened. This is my life now. And I was like, wow, that sounds like my life. My life sucks. And now his life is great. And all he did was go through this program. I want that, And so, I say that because for me, long term, I want to integrate that into my life professionally somehow. How can I continue playing poker and share my experience with others in a way that will help them, inspire them to not only just get sober, but whatever issue they might be having, to realize where they're at, make a decision, make an admission first of where they're at, like what's the problem, make a decision that, they can't go on living their life, with that problem, and be willing to make the changes that are necessary, and just show people like, hey, it's possible, right? Like a very simple, if I did it, you can do it, so yeah, so that's what I would say about that. Short term and long term, continue to improve, play higher stakes, make more money. Very simple. Um, Mostly going to be focused on live poker. I miss online. I used to play 30,000 hands a month. I think last year in 2025, I played 30,000 hands all year. And originally the plan was to transition where I played half online, half full time, or half live, and boom, just went to full time live. And so, but I do see some opportunities, in the future for playing more online. So yeah, improve, play more poker, play higher stakes, make more money, and, try to inspire others just by sharing my story, my experience, and see if I can help somebody better their life the same way, people help me better mine.
I mean, it's funny to look at like all of our journeys of how long we've kind of known each other and how we're where we kind of swayed our paths. How we all, I guess you and I were playing online cash. Lucas was playing live poker, and um,
Now he's
then I was playing live poker and like a little bit of online tournaments, and then it's like Craig, come play or come play live poker for years. And then it's funny, I right when I get you into live poker, it's almost like I was your
you're like my
spiritual
chaperone. Like you
guide.
brought me there, and then like you put me there. Like here, sit down, play. You'll enjoy it. I'll see you later. I'm gonna go play online MPTs now. I'm like, okay, bye.
Yeah, and now you're playing virtually no online poker, and you're on your journey of live poker, and Lucas and I are now like just fully grinding online MTTs like nonstop, and then pretty much just stepped out of the cash world. And that transition happened organically in the like I think all of it happened organically between all of us, like meeting Lucas and you. Like I never expected. If you asked me years ago, I would never expect like we'd be sitting here doing something like this,
Mhm.
talking about how we've all impacted each other's lives and the paths that we all went down. So it's just really cool to kind of view, and then talking about our goals and of the progression that we all have gone through within the game, and how we've all experienced downswings and have had to help each other and hold each other up during that. Um, and then recently for me, it's been I guess the journey for me recently has been finding gratitude within like the game. So like, I remember going through this period recently where it was almost like I was treating different tournament sizes with different appreciation levels. And of course,
Mhm.
like, oh, like I was in a spot where I had to drop down. I wasn't playing 250s anymore, and I wasn't feeling good playing poker. Like I almost just had a lack of gratitude for what I was doing, and I was comparing myself to other players, and um, yeah, dropping to that baseline of where, you know, you have to work on the mental game of just like, oh, okay, I get to play the mini nightly stars tonight, right? I get to play this $50 tournament tonight, and I get to do this for a living. Like just getting back into that place. And I mean, for you, it's like we can focus so much on the goals ahead of us, and then but sometimes when you just sit down, like you sit down at the 2-5 table, right? And like maybe just taking, even if it's just like 20 seconds, being like, wow, I get to sit with like these chips in front of me and do this as for a living, despite all the other issues that like go on and the adversity we face as poker players. Like that, it's at the core, it's really, really a beautiful thing and something that we all just love and enjoy doing. That's why we keep going back, even though could
Yeah,
drive us
that's, for
crazy.
me, that's a big part of, I don't want to say every day or daily, but regularly.
Hmm.
I don't want to call it a pregame routine, but you know, I live in North Jersey, hours away from any casino, so it's not something where I'm going to like drive an hour, 2 hours a day and drive home. So, I drove 2 hours down to Atlantic City and I stay there for a couple of days, and that's where I'll play. And so I'll be in the room after whatever I've done early on in the day, get ready to go downstairs and play. And very often, I stand there, I look out the window, maybe I'm looking out the water, maybe I'm looking out the little city area of cars driving by, and just breathe it in and realize like, wow, like this is my life.
Hmm.
I have very vivid memories of being in a jail cell and looking out the window through bars,
Hmm.
and being told where to go. I have
Hmm.
very vivid memories of the way I looked and felt when I was, an alcoholic and drug addict. And
Hmm.
that life is so different than this life, and that gratitude
Hmm.
you talked about like, wow, like this is what I get to do. Like I get to live here, like stay at a casino and go play poker and share my story and laugh and have fun and win money. And like, wow, this is amazing. Like this, I very often have that thought in my head of like, I can't believe this is my life, but
Yeah.
it is, this is the life I get to live now. And sure, it also comes with painful moments, on more than one occasion, including recently. I've had a couple days in a row, where you just for me, I lose an amount of money that's painful. However many big blinds it is, whatever dollars, it doesn't matter. Like relative to my bankroll, relative to my life, relative to where I've been, like I've lost an amount of money over the course of 2 or 3 days. That's pain. It hurts. And I've gone upstairs after the session, sat down in a chair, and just cried. And cried like a little freaking baby. And just cried. Just crying because it fucking hurts. And like that's just part of the experience. And I can say that now and laugh about it. I can exaggerate, like I did that. Like I lost money, I went upstairs, I cried. I did that. That happened. And for me, that's part of the experience that I can do that. Whereas compared to even a couple of years ago, early on in playing online poker, probably that first, we talked about like, the first upswing. Yeah, well, the first downswing I had was pretty nasty for me. I continued to make it worse, playing many hours, playing, not in the right mindset or whatever that means. And one day after losing another, bad beat, I reacted so quickly, like just bang, smashed my hand on my desk, ended up, breaking a bone in my pinky, and so like I did that too, and I've learned from that experience. And so, the journey I've had of playing poker has included those moments, and these moments now. And I tell you one thing, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So
Yeah, well, you learn, right? I think it's all about learning and growing. But I remember that downswing you had. You snapped back into old behavior, it seemed, and you reclused and like you were hiding away. I could not get in contact with you whatsoever. I'm like, dude, are
yeah,
you okay? Just absolutely
yeah,
nothing. Like I didn't hear from you for a month.
yeah,
And then we had a talk. I was like, you don't, don't do that again. Like, I don't think that's beneficial. Like, it was unfair. I think you knew that it was unfair to me or unfair to do to like a friend who cares
yeah,
about you to like cut them out. Um,
yeah,
I think because I was concerned, I was like, but it did teach me, like, I think, and maybe like you, like, it was almost like I think a bad downswing will bring back old habits, and then now you have to you're forced to like face them or, um, yeah. But yeah, I remember that, and you haven't done the same thing since. But I remember that was pretty ugly, and it was one that hurt you quite a bit at the time. But
yeah. Not the same thing
it was,
since, but there was one other, the time where I had that hand with you, Lucas, and really upset after losing a big pot, was in a big downswing, and kind of like a little baby, I stood up like, "Fuck, I'm leaving," and didn't
Yeah.
want to come back. And looking back, I mean, and that was only what, a year and a half ago or something.
Yeah.
So the way I think kind of conceptually about my life or life in general, or sobriety and my journey, like a poker graph, right? You look at your poker tracker, your hold'em manager, your online poker graph. Like if you're a good winning player, point A and point B, right? It's going to be, but in the middle, there's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of like, it's not just going to be a pure linear progression. And that's how I view my life now. That's how I view sobriety, and playing poker. It's I no longer expect to just continually grow perfectly linearly up, for the
Mhm,
rest of my life. Like I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to fuck up. I'm going to have a little outburst. Like that will happen. And
mhm,
if I'm, willing and able to be present when that happens and notice what's going on, take responsibility for it, make amends, when I hurt somebody else by doing that, and then just recommit to getting back on track. That's what I want to do. I don't want
mhm.
to expect a life where I'm going to be perfect. I want to expect a life that
Right.
when I make mistakes, I can recognize, take responsibility, make amends, and then move forward. And I'd be
Yeah,
cool
and
to be my,
the same thing goes for. Oh, sorry, did I cut you off?
no, I just said like if
Um,
I can do that, I'd be happy.
yeah, I'm interested to hear Lucas's perspective on this, but yeah, I think like expecting the same thing from friends and people that you're close to too. It's like friendships always have, and being close to people, you tend to have like little ups and downs, but you're always like growing together and forgiving each other because it's really it's part of the beautiful thing about connecting with people is that we're human and we make mistakes and we upset each other and then we bring joy to each other and all those things. But Lucas is someone that has gone through some severe downswings and has helped me through certain downswings. So I'm definitely curious to hear his perspective on what it's like to personally go through a bad downswing, how that contrasts through an upswing, um, and how he's helped get himself through some of those and how he's helped others get through theirs.
Yeah, so there were like I guess a couple of like memorable downswings. One of them was when I was playing live poker.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing primarily 10 10 20 and 10 20 40. Um, and I had gone on like a really huge upswing. I mean, I shot took 10 20 40 and like immediately won, I want to say like six buy-ins my first like two sessions, like just huge upswing, right? There was a session, I think it was like a 3 4 month period. This is like live poker, right? So like I was playing these stakes maybe once, twice a week, maybe three times if I was lucky. There was a period of time where I won, I think, something like seven buy-ins in a session, right? So I had gone through this huge upswing period, and then there was a point in time where, probably compounded by errors, and also just mistakes, I had downswing, huge downswing, right? So, and for me, what it really taught me this, I guess, period of time was you you can't, if you let the results get to you, you're going to play worse, right? You're going to, whether you want to admit it or not, if you're on a downswing, you're also probably doing something wrong just because you're just blinded by the results. You're blinded by the fact that you lost with a set versus a gut shot and, when you were 200 big blinds deep, or you're blinded by the fact that, um, you didn't hold in an all-in pre-flop spot when you were 80-20 favorite. Like, and these things can just happen very frequently back to back. And this is when I was playing cash games. I now play tournaments, and those, 70-30s, 80-20s, you can be on the bad side of those for a very long time. And
Yep.
you can, and even more so if you happen to lose that at a critical juncture, right? Like FT bubble, or you're on the FT for a chip lead pot, or your final two tables flipping for the chip lead. Like, you can you can lose a lot of those in a row. And then the second, I guess, downswing I had was like in tournaments. I um i was just losing a lot of big spots in a lot of big buy-in tournaments, like in 500s, in 1Ks, and like 250s, like really big fields, right? Just losing a lot of these very high equity spots. And this is after I had gone through my live cash downswing, and sort of, when you're going through a downswing, you have to, you get, I guess, you get more attached to the results, right? Each result means more and more, and you kind of feel like you're due. This can't continue happening forever. Or, you can't keep losing 80-20s. And, I always joke about with Justin with this, like, when we're on a downswing, I'm like, well, I guess it's time to run average now because that's what's expected. You're not expected to run above or below. You're just expected to run average. You hope to run good, but you don't really control that stuff. Um, so I think just like
Always.
rooting yourself in like reality very often, like we all want to hope that after a downswing comes an upswing, but in reality, you're just going to run average and you're going to be whatever your win rate is, right? Tournaments, there's a bit more variance in like being able to show and prove that. In cash games, it's a bit less. Um, but yeah, even in cash games over a large sample, right? Even over 100,000 hands, I've seen nasty graphs of like people running four, five big blinds below EV over like 100,000 sample, right? They're like slightly losing or break even, but their EV line, they're like a crushing player. And
Mhm.
I think, when you're running bad, a lot of things, you tend to compound your errors. You tend to not take a step back, right? When everything's good, when you're running well, you don't mind if you lose the two pair, okay, so what? I've had a good month. But when you're on that downswing, I think mental game in poker is something that is probably the area that is, there's not a lot of material out there for mental game, I don't think. And I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
think it's
the area that's, it's not appreciated as much. I think people focus too much on actual like solvers and what should I have done here and strategy, and people tend to ignore the mental aspect of things when I think it's probably the most important aspect of the game.
I 100% agree with that. And there's tons of different areas where mental game leaks will pop up. Like winner's tilt, like, oh, I'm up 1,000, I should leave the table like 3 hours before I wanted to end my session, or I'm down, or like you have a few losing days in a row and you get so down in the dumps where you don't play for like 2 weeks. But it's funny, sometimes, like, I think trying to acknowledge them, like making sure you're aware of your own personal mental leaks is really important. And then oftentimes, like when you're going through an egregious downswing, taking a good step back and really shifting your energy when you go back into it is important. So, like, the biggest downswing I went on was this October, and like, well, late September, early October. I just crashed down, lost like 30,000, and nothing was changing. I just kept playing and playing and playing and playing, and it was like I never took a step back till I went to Costa Rica for a full month. But like what that did was I came back almost like a new person. My energy was completely different, and then when I came back, the downswing was over, and it always seems to change when your energy changes. And maybe that's just me making something up in my head, but that's something that I've experienced a lot. Is I think there's always lessons in a downswing, and um, oftentimes it takes reshifting what your energy is and accepting what is not there anymore. So like, oh, I was this much richer. Could afford this buy-in, but now you can't. And then like when you finally accept that and then move forward, um, and shift your energy and perspective, I think that's when things tend to turn around. I don't know if you agree with me, Craig. I don't what your experience is with recent like downswings, or like almost climbing your way out of a downswing. How does that feel when that shift happens? How does it feel at the bottom of the downswing, the midst?
Uh, I think, well, here's the way I want to answer this question. I've grown a lot in this area in the past, I'd say like year to year and a half. And a matter of fact, it's been my primary focus, much more so than, if we consider playing time, and let's just block everything else into study time, right? So there's like playing time and
Mm-hmm.
study time. If you just kind of simplify the two buckets of our time as pros, and for me, that study time bucket has been, uh, I'd be willing to say somewhat somewhere up to 75-80% of the time, just like focusing on, what most people call, what you're referring to as like mental game. And I talk more, or think about it more in terms of like emotional game. Because what I've learned and what I've experienced and what I notice is that, I am always feeling something, when I'm playing poker, and then that something can be labeled as some kind of emotion. And usually that experience is a combination of thoughts that I'm having in my head and sensations I'm having in my body. And the more I'm willing to accept the experience I'm having at that moment, if it's the pain in my body plus the thought of, I can't fucking believe this, not again, and blah, 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 and just notice that, okay, I'm having the thought that this happened again. And I'm feeling this tightness in my chest, and I'm feeling a little short of breath, like I want to take deep breaths because I just lost a big pot. Like whatever that combination of thoughts and emotions or sensations I'm having, the more I'm able to recognize them and just let myself experience them as they're happening, the faster I'll get back to performing at my best, and the better I'll be able to perform. And therefore, I lose less during a downswing and I win more during an upswing. If I'm able to be present with my emotions, you like one of the first examples you gave, Justin, was like the winner's tilt, right? Like if I'm playing really well and winning a lot of money in the game, and I'm aware of everything that's going on, I'm going to stay in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to pack up and leave and just try to book a win. I've done that in the past. And what I've learned is really what's happening is I'm avoiding the possibility, which I'm afraid of, that I will no longer be winning that much. God forbid I go to bed on a, what is that? Like actually, I forget the name of it. Like when you're, Upstuck. right? Like I
Stuck.
was up
Yeah.
this much, but now I'm not. Like
Mhm.
I can't go to bed feeling that. I got to get back to
Mhm.
that peak of the session. But I no longer do that. Like I'm willing to accept, whatever experience I'm having in that moment. If it's time to pack up because I'm tired, the game's not good, or more importantly, I'm no longer having a good time, I'm going to pack up.
Mhm.
Even if that means I'm
Right.
upset, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I really have put a big emphasis over this past year and a half, on practicing that skill and improving in that skill because that's what I've learned it to be, and that's what I believe it to be is a skill of being present with your emotions, letting yourself, experience the emotions you're having, and being able to then perform. Make a good decision in each hand, right? Like that's maybe at its simplest, like the goal for me or whatever every poker player is like, you know, every time it's my turn to act, I'm going to have several options. I want to recognize those options, bet, raise, check, call, fold, consider what I think the best way to, make money with my hand in this spot is, and then make that choice, and I'll best be able to do that if I'm fully present with my emotions, Ooh, wow, I feel really scared here. Um, I got nothing, and I'm on the river, and the dude just called me, and I want to bluff. I think this is a good spot. I don't know if he's going to call. My heart's racing. I don't know if he's looking at me. I really think this is a good hand to bluff, though, so I'm all in. Like, if I can recognize everything I'm feeling and thinking, and then still make what I think is the best choice, whatever happens. Like, if he snap calls, that's fine. Like, maybe I don't want that to happen, but like, I can handle that. Versus like, oh, that's too much. Like, okay, I check, I give up. I can't handle what it would feel like if that happens. So yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
how
I think a lot of people try to be robots or turn their emotions off, and you've kind of veered in the opposite direction.
yeah.
Um, and you coach too, so I'm curious. I'm sure that this has come up with students before. Um, how do you? I mean, your style is unique and almost exaggerated because when I play at the table with you, you will when you have a tough river decision, you're doing this like I don't know. So it's
Yeah.
it's unique. Do you what kind of guidelines if someone's new to poker and they want to pursue this? It is everyone goes through this phase of being very and some people mature faster than others emotionally in the game, almost like poker emotional maturity. Um, what is your advice or how do you guide a student to become more um, to become stronger emotionally in the game of poker? Emotional game, we'll call it.
Hmm. Let's see. I don't know how to answer that, so I'll try my best and see if it's what you're thinking. So I'll start by saying like the homework I'll give my students when they're playing live poker and they're going to come back and they want to like, okay, I'm going to play a session this Friday and I'm going to record some hands. I say, okay, so like here's your homework. The number one thing I want you to do when you record the hand is write down how was I feeling at this time? What were the
Mm-hmm.
thoughts I was having and what were the sensations? For example,
Mm-hmm.
if you're facing a big bet on the river, are you having the thought that this guy's trying to bluff me again? He
Mm-hmm.
three bet me 4 times today. Are those the thoughts you're having? What kind of sensations? Are you feeling tight in your chest? Are you feeling nervous energy? Do you feel just empty and calm, right? Like that's what I want you to take note of because the more you take note of that, the more you get present in that moment and recognize what are the thoughts I'm having and what are the sensations in my body. Like, what is it? And where is it and what's happening? Oh, it's in my chest and it's squeezing. It's in my stomach and it's swirly, bubbly, nervous feeling, right? Like, doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. Like some pattern will be different for me than each of you and student A and student B, but that's what I think. So if that answers your question, I think the steps that I've taken that helped me get there is practice noticing what are the thoughts I'm having and what are the sensations in my body. Because then what I share with students and friends and my girlfriend and people in life is think about that experience. Like that's what we call an emotion. Like, oh, I can't believe this is fucking happening and my chest is really tight. Like I'm in disbelief. Okay, that's the label. So pretend disbelief is like some ugly, annoying person just sitting next to you. would you be okay just sitting there and letting this person be there? Or do you have to run away from him? You have to make him go away. Like, can you be okay with that emotion being there with you? And if the answer is yes, and you can be okay, like, all right, this really fucking annoying guy's next to me. He's causing me to think this shit, and my body feels this way. That's what's happening right now. That's what it's like to be me. Now, what's my job? Okay, my job is to make the best decision while I'm having this experience. Not pretend it's not happening, not wish it's going away, but make the best poker decision that I want to make while this is happening, you know? And yeah, so that's what I'm trying to achieve. And so, that's what I'm trying to help my students achieve too. And that final piece of what's the best poker decision, I'm not certainly I have to study a lot of solvers and I've studied a lot of poker, theory and content and et cetera. But at the end, what I think is everybody might have a different perception of or idea of like what's the best thing to do in this moment, in this spot, with this hand on this board against this opponent, right now. And part of that includes what do I want to do? You know what? I don't know. I don't like played a hand yesterday and I played against a reg and I open, he calls, I see bet the flop, he calls, I check, he bets, I check raise turn. My plan is I think I've got a really good spot. Given this board, this sequence, my position, his range, like this is a great spot to check raise turn, jam river, and I'm pretty sure he's going to fold like the majority of his range. And yeah, that's what I want to do. And I did that. And he tanked on the river and he said, oh, Craig, I don't know if I want to double you up, man. Shit, I don't know. Yeah, I think I will. All right, I call. I just mucked. That happened. And was that the right play? Oh man, I don't know. I don't know if you guys would have done it or anybody else would have done it. Maybe you all would have. Maybe it's the best. Maybe it's the worst. I don't know. But you know what? Like in that moment, I was really present with how I felt and what I wanted to do, and I did that. And like I love that I get to do that as my job.
Mhm.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It
I'm
does.
sorry. That's what came to me when I heard you
No, I
ask.
think it's great. I mean, I think tying into making the best decision at the time, I think is really important with mental/emotional game. I think that I see a lot of players get stuck all the time in like they're used to studying and then having the answers for them like, oh, this is the best decision here with this. And so there's unique situations that come up at the table, whether online or in person. And
Hmm.
part of developing, I think, as a poker player is trusting the conclusions that you come up with, trusting yourself to fire a bluff or to go for thin value or to look silly. We,
Hmm.
as poker players right now, we have access to so many resources that help us study and prepare and um, help us understand the theory of the game very well. But what's lacking now is like that has almost overtaken actual decision making within the game, and especially in a format like live cash where it's very dominated by instincts and paying attention and being creative and making decisions that are outside the book per se. And I think I see a lot of people struggle with that where it's not they're asking the wrong questions while they're playing poker. They're asking, oh, what am I supposed to do here? Not
I'm
what do I think
going to
is
say
best.
that. Yeah, what am I
Yeah,
supposed to do? That's the
what
worst
am I
question.
supposed to do here? Not like what do I
Uh,
think is best to do here given this spot. And
yeah.
I've done some crazy I've made huge mistakes like thinking from that personal standpoint, but I've also like when I get into a flow state, that's the way I'm thinking. I'm not like thinking, oh, what am I supposed to do here or here? And there's certain spots where like that is important, like, oh, should I be opening Jack 9-0 in the cutoff, right? Like
Yeah.
there's pre-flop decisions that like are definitely like just by the book kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, post flop, I mean, there's so many unique situations where you have to start trusting your intuition and becoming a good thinking poker player that is personally making those decisions, not like, oh, what does the book say about
Hmm.
when a whale limp raises to 7x big blinds, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, Craig. I was just gonna add, like, I think the execution part of poker
Mm-hmm.
is very understated, right?
Hmm.
For both cash and MTTs, I think most regs are gonna know pre-flop basically the same, right? Pre-flop, probably this is more true for cash games. MTT pre-flop is very, very complicated, especially once you start considering ICM. But at least for cash games, right? Pre-flop is all the regs know what pre-flop's supposed to look like. Um, and then post-flop, most regs know probably like about what size they should use on most flops in single raise pots, three bet pots, etc. And but what I think Justin's point is very like pointing at is the execution part of poker of like, okay, I know what the theory says, or I know what the solver's gonna say, or I think I know what the solver's gonna say, because sometimes you don't. You're just sort of guesstimating. But like, what about this spot versus this opponent? And I think that is very important. And I think for tournaments, it's very important because right in a cash game, you're just trying to generate EV. There's no spots, I guess. There's no spots to take in the sense of you can always just rebuy. Tournament, you can't do that, right? There is the future game aspect of like, all right, I'm final two tables of this 1,000 man field with 20K up top, and I'm the only reg left in out of these 16 players, right? Do you really want to take this high variance spot? Probably not. You can't rebuy, right? Am I really gonna triple into this guy who's a calling station and I have a really good bluff candidate and he's supposed to overfold because I'm a big stack and he's a short stack and he, all this stuff. And when you kind of get dragged into that world, you almost fail to take ownership for your own decisions and you can very often go afterwards and it's very easy to just plug it into a solver and it says, oh, solver says to do this. And you're like, all right, well, I play the hand well. And but even now the solvers, you can node lock stuff. You can like see like, oh, if this guy's calling too wide or isn't check raising enough on the flop, like what should I do? So I think execution is also very important. You can be very, very studied at the game, but if you're not able to execute in game, that's you're leaving a lot of money on the table for sure.
Yeah, and I'll combine that, just kind of repeating some of the things that you guys said to like, the way I think about this stuff, like executing, taking responsibility for your own decisions, right? And then adding that with what Justin said about being willing to look stupid, and I'll combine that to say like before you start playing any session, like, will you give yourself permission to do those things? Right? Like, do you give yourself permission today when you're going to play to make a play that, like, I'm just getting chills in my legs just even thinking about that. That like other people might watch you do that, especially at the live poker table, and be like, what's wrong? What the? Whoa, he did what? You're like, the way I see it is if I'm willing to give myself permission to make those plays, because in that moment, I believe, I think, I'm having the thought, like, I see this player, I understand whatever this is the best decision. This is the way I make the most money, right? Like, am I willing to do that? You compare cash and MTTs, and yeah, like I'm willing. When I'm playing a deep stack live cash game, I'm willing to take a spot that if we had the math in front of us, I need 35% equity to make this call. I only got 32. I'll make that. I'll take a tiny, loss in the current EV in that one particular call, because here's what I believe. Like, I'm cool if I lose this hand. He's not. And if he's not cool when I win and he rebuys and starts tilting off, that's more EV for me. If he wins, this guy, I'm cool at losing. He's got a big stack now. He's going to keep making mistakes. The whole game will be bigger and more action, and I'll more than make up for that EV, like you said, in the future game. And so like being aware of that stuff and that dynamics, giving myself permission to make those plays, taking responsibility for my decisions. I did that. I made this play. I was willing to look stupid. I remember a hand I played not too long ago where, after a fish, I'm playing a hand against a fish, and this is a live poker game, and this guy was, a drunk older guy, like VPIP 100, and we get to a river, and I miss my draw, and he bets, and I'm like, you know what? Like, and like I didn't have much left. Like, basically, I had to min raise, bluff, jam, that was, or fold. Like, I can't call, but I think he's got a lot of missed draws that are higher than my missed draw, and like, if you do the math, he's only got to fold, 15% of the time to make that good. And I'm taking my time. I'm just kind of looking at him. He looked really uncomfortable. I was like, yeah, man, like I'm going to, this is what I want to do. I want to bluff raise jam like the minimum into this huge pot because it's only got to work a few times. I think it will. And he snap called. And everybody looked at me because like I'm the pro at the table and the other regs are looking at me. And I just looked my hand. They're like, what? Like, they were so confused. I probably looked really stupid, but I was so cool with that. Like I was ready, I was willing, I gave myself permission. Whatever happens, like I was really happy with that. And my
Hmm.
heart was beating as I'm thinking about like as soon as I started thinking about doing it, my heart's beating. I'm like, no man, this is what I want to do. If you're willing to do that,
Yeah,
that's
it
that's what I'm
well,
interested
it
in.
came from a place I very often I don't we probably don't regret moves that come from a place of clarity very often. Like,
Never, exactly,
when they
never.
come from a
Have
place
you
of
ever
clarity,
regretted a move
it's
like that? Never. I've never said, you know what?
no.
I was so locked in that moment when I made that decision, and I regret doing it. Never. I've never felt that. I've never said that.
Yeah.
But I've
Well,
regretted making a snap call. I've regretted making decisions that I didn't really get present with. That's when I regret my decision.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. And what I was going to get into is like, I think people, so it's fight, flight, or freeze. That's like our nervous system reaction, right? And I think each person leans towards one of those three. And mine is fight. Like, but I know I regret a lot when I get in the fight mode. Like, even last night, I felt it for a little bit, and I've gotten so good at like calming myself down. Like, if someone three bets me like three times in a row, and I start to get the thing like, fuck this fucker, I'm gonna four bet bluff him. Like, even though I know it's like, I'll get those thoughts. I'll be like, this piece of shit. Like, I get in such a fight mode. Um,
Mhm.
but that's been good because I've had to learn how to not take those like things personally. And I think one of the most crippling ones could be freeze. I wouldn't I mean I don't really deal with freeze that much. It tends to be fight. Like I've really had to work on that. I think from my cash days the way I used to play, and um I always have had this tendency to just want to like if someone's pushing me or take it personally like they're pushing me, I'm gonna bring a brick wall and like try to.
Yeah.
I've regretted so many decisions from a state of fight. Um, but yeah, I think it's important to identify the how your nervous system wants to react to being in uncomfortable positions at the poker table, and um, to be able to quickly identify that and to bring yourself back to the state you were talking about earlier, like a clear state. Because very infrequently, even if you lose a lot of money, when you're thinking from a place of clarity, very oftentimes you come to the conclusion that you made the best possible decision with the information you were given at that time. And that's like where we want to be as competitive players. Um,
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
what you just said as far as like getting your like recognizing when you're in that state, like, all right, I'm having the thought that this fucking guy three bet me three times in a row. And is that true? No, that's just a story in my head. The truth is
Hmm.
that player had a hand at that configuration that he's going to do that action with. Right. So like he's not three betting Justin three times in a row. Like, I'm going to get him. I can't wait till it's my turn. I'm going to three bet Justin again. Like, no,
Yeah.
that's not true. That's a story. And I'm feeling really tense and like a ton of energy just pulsing through my body like electric. Okay, like that's what's going on inside me right now.
Hmm.
Ooh, right? Get present with that. Recognize that's what's happening. And what do I want to do? Okay. Do I want to just blast off and aggress and get him? No, that's probably not a good idea. I want to make the best decision right now. Okay. Maybe
Hmm.
that's full. Maybe that is four bet bluff. Whatever it comes to be. Getting, like you said, getting present and then getting yourself back into a state. And I started really learning about that and working on that after I started playing live poker. And there's so many, techniques now that I have that I've learned and that I can use when I'm at the poker table, some of which you mentioned, like I'll stand up, make a noise. I sometimes rub my belly. If I'm often, yeah, I'm at the poker table, I'm sitting there, I'm like constantly shuffling the chips with my right hand. I'll stop. I'll
Yeah.
stand up. I might rub the felt. I might listen. I
And you
might,
do this sometimes too.
yeah, I do that,
Your legs. Yeah.
or I'll fully take my attention away from the hand, the pot, the board, and I'll focus on all those sounds that are going on over there in the poker room. Other people shuffling, other people, and then come back. It's like, okay, here I am, you know, and I'm
Yeah.
still having that sensation. My heart might still be beating. I still might feel, this nervous energy. But now I'm aware of it. I know what's going on, and now I can just make a
Hmm.
poker decision and be comfortable with it, no matter what happens.
Lucas, what do you think your reaction tends to be? You tend to be pretty cool at the table, but I don't know. Have you ever been like, oh, I've gotten into a state of fight, flight, or freeze and made poor decisions?
Oh, I've probably done all three of those many times in the past week. But like, there was an example, for example, on Sunday in the 250 Sunday main on MGM. I had Maniacal Monk on my left on the bubble, and I think throughout the course of the bubble, he like had three bet me four times, and we were like even stacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one hand that was like really marginal that like could have started clicking buttons,
Mm-hmm.
but I was like, is he really gonna like four bet me four times in a row? Like the fourth time being a bluff? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of goes into game flow state. But again, this kind of comes back to what Craig was saying is like being very present, you
Mm-hmm.
know, being sort of, yeah, just being present in the moments, not taking things personally. Sometimes they treat things personally. That doesn't mean you have to treat things personally. You
Mm-hmm.
can exploit that. And I feel like you can do this a bit more in live, where you see someone get stacked or they're down two binds. And this tends to happen more with regs because regs are generally the ones who have the ability to rebuy multiple times, right? Recreationals generally have one or two bullets and then they're done. But especially with regs, if they're down three buy-ins and you can tell they're steaming, that three bet range is probably a little light, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
as a hunch. So like as for like what I tend to lean towards, probably fight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just my general instinct tends to be a bit more aggression,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't tend to do like unmitigated aggression. At least not pre-flop. Post-flop I will just sometimes just like go crazy. But like pre-flop
Yeah.
at least I try to stay in line. And then post-flop I can go nuts sometimes. But pre-flop for the most part in line, and then post-flop definitely lean towards
Oh,
the
I think he
fight.
froze out. Oh, you're back. Yeah, I've noticed that. You need to, but you seem to be very keen. I pick up a lot on the. I mean, there's people we're close friends with. I think I have a good understanding of what their like reaction is.
Yeah.
Whether it be fight, flight, or freeze. It's hard to know with you though, because you're able to like flip a switch pretty quick. But yeah,
I
I guess
think
like.
I think like there was the 1 KFT. So MGM had this hybrid event where they played though they played almost the whole tournament down to six players. It was online, right? So the whole $1,000 buy-in was online, and the final six played out at the Borgata. And I actually watched that whole FT, and I thought it was pretty instructive, as to like how players are thinking and how players are like how they react to flow on an
Mm-hmm.
FT. There was a spot I remember T Slate took versus Aubrey, blind v blind. Aubrey had been like, chip leading the whole thing, playing very, very aggressively, as she should. Um, and T Slate had, I think, like four or five times in a row limped the small blind versus her, and she was on his direct left. And
And she
she had
raised every time.
ISO'd like every single time. And he had like 650, 760, like a lot of very marginal hands that don't want to
Mm-hmm.
raise, they don't want to jam, they just want to limp and see if they can take a flop. And like I think the fourth or fifth time he had 8-7 suited, so a little bit of a better hand. So he limps, and she ISOs to 3x, and I think he was like 20 big blinds effective or so, and he just jammed. And in my head, I'm like, I don't think this is a jam, and I actually checked the spot, and sure enough, it's not really. You're not supposed to jam there with the stack distribution. But that was like kind of interesting to see how players react to aggression when they just think they're getting run over, right?
Yeah,
Um,
but he could also take that as she's overdoing it,
could
and
also be
so
for
that
exploitative reasons, which I think
Mm-hmm.
rewatching the replays, she was probably too aggressive, and that's
Mm-hmm.
hard to do as a chip leader, but maybe a little too aggressive. But like, um, and there was another spot, blind v blind, where I think Napoli stacks, limp Jack three suited versus her, and this is when she was chip leading. I think there was five left, maybe, and he limped, she ISO'd, and he like three bet, limp three bet Jack three suited. Again, this was a hand I'm like, I'm pretty sure this hand doesn't really do a good job doing this, this type of limp re-raise.
Mm-hmm.
And I also I checked that spot again, and I was like, yeah, sure enough, it wasn't. But it goes to show that like pros, people don't really talk about game flow all that much, but pros definitely feel things
Mm-hmm.
and they react to things.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they just look at a hand that potentially might in some world be able to do it, and they just do, just because they have a feeling, right? Um, so I think, that aspect is like the whole game flow, and like if you feel you're being pushed over, some guys just put their foot down and they're like, I kind of don't really care if this hand is or isn't supposed to do it. I feel like I'm getting run over, so I'm just gonna say no and I'm gonna try and fight back.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, I've definitely felt things too. Like you pick up on things and then you start adjusting, and then, you just want to make sure you don't get it too out of hand. Because, yeah, that's definitely a way to make some big mistakes. And we've all been there before.
Oh yeah.
But,
You three bet light, you see bet the flop because you're the pre-flop aggressor in position. You get to the turn. It's a good, it's a king on the turn, really good for your range. You have absolute dust in your hand. You bet again, and then you get to the river. You have seven high somehow, and you're like, well, I
mhm.
can't give up now. Surely not. And then you fire the third barrel, and you know sometimes when you have a hand that you shouldn't, you very often just like triple it off because you're like, I should never have this hand. This is bottom.
Yeah, just go for it.
Yeah, you
Yeah, you
just
can get yourself in
go for it.
trouble.
Yeah.
Remember Craig once limp raised me at Borgata right when he started doing his like limp raising strategy, and he did it like a couple times in a row. I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, this motherfucker.
Well, also
I had
I
like
remember one time
sixes
when I
every
did
one.
it, I just totally miscalculated the stack size, and
And
so
you
like I think
jammed
I limp jammed, like way too big. I was like,
like
oh
a
wait, I
hundred
didn't
bigs or
realize you had that
something.
much. Uh, but
I looked at you. I'm like, well, I almost called you. I had to take a breath.
a
Like
thought that came to
sixes.
my mind here, like in this discussion about like regs and responding to like game flow and stuff. I recall a time this was near near the end of when I was playing online full time, and over time I developed a lot from like a like theoretically sound player to like very
Mm-hmm.
NDA driven
Yep.
strategies. And in the course of doing that, like one of the tools, I use different tools and software and just like routine, kind of database analysis to like check on myself, like what's up my game, what's going wrong, for example. And one area I found this very specific note, where I was, it happened mostly when I was the pre-flop three better. So pre-flop, I'm an aggressor, and I end up calling a river bet. However, that ended up happening. But like, so I'm the three better, you call, maybe I see bet, double barrel check call, maybe I check, or bet check, whatever the line was that got me to the river. And like, I'm looking at hands and there was no clear pattern. There wasn't like some hand category, but something became very clear to me, like in my gut, like I have a problem when I'm the aggressor. I start to develop some expectation. I'm going to win this hand. This is mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not willing to accept when things change. And
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes no longer mine. And you're
Mm-hmm.
telling me it's yours. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to allow that to be. And so I
Mm-hmm.
call River, make bad calls. I make calls that are losing EV because that player's not bluffing that spot enough. And I'm calling with a bluff catcher. My flop nutted hand, like a flop set, turned into a bluff catcher on a flush or four liner, right? And yet I still end up calling. And that for me is just one example of how I'm a regular, and I still am allowing things to affect me emotionally, and that emotion was then causing me to make decisions that I was losing EV. In that one node where
100%.
I'm a pre-flop aggressor, and I end up calling a river bet 'cause I'm not accepting what's true. That
Mm-hmm.
I have a bluff catcher. This spot's under bluff. The highest EV play is to fold. No, I won't allow that. I'm unwilling to accept. And for me, like
Yeah.
identifying those things within ourselves, where that occurs for us, for me, it became a huge help. Maybe I over adjusted to some degree. Hard to say though when you're playing a live 2-5 game where the vast majority of the recreationals and average live pros are just significantly under bluffing in most river nodes. But yeah, I use that to my benefit now, and what I believe is saving a lot of money and folding rivers when people are just not bluffing enough, and allowing that to be, accepting that that's what's true, and not allowing my emotion to drive me to a different decision.
Yeah, yeah, I've dealt with the same thing, and I think it's just I think how we view folding. I think sometimes it's hard to remember that folding is a tool in our toolbox that
Hmm.
can be used and can be and like overfolding can be used for a positive thing, or a negative thing, right? Like folding could be just a very powerful tool, and could be um, it can win you a lot of money. Basically, when you start to view folding as something that could win you a lot of money, then I think you kind of start to view the game differently. Because I used to have problems with that too. You have a bluff catcher, like it's hard to accept that things change throughout the hand, and now your highest EV play is folding. Um, Sometimes it's hard to get there.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, you definitely went through that phase. I think we talked about where you were overcalling, even online, like overcalling river stuff, and you were losing a lot of money with that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think something that you've probably addressed and have gotten much better at. Um,
Yeah, even like
yeah.
it's funny, as when I just said that a minute ago, I got this like
Hmm.
ping in my stomach when I said the word overfolding. Maybe I'm overfolding. I was like, oh, that's no, that's not true. Like I've actually come to believe there's no such thing as overfolding. Like I believe
Right.
like if the guy's only bluffing 10% of the time, you know, and I need 30% to call, like I can't be overfolding. Like I'm just
Well, you're
folding
correctly
into the
adjusting.
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
adjusting, like it almost like maybe it's just a linguistic thing, maybe it's like an ego thing in my head still of like, no, I'm not over folding, like I just think I'm folding when I believe it's the best play to do. Maybe I'm not right sometimes, maybe this is the time he's bluffing out, who knows, I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of how I've come to think of it that, I don't think I'm over folding. I just think I'm folding when I think they're under bluffing compared to the price that I'm getting.
Yeah. Let's start to wrap things up. It's almost like in football. I think this is one of the better examples I've heard. Is like if a player or if a team is only playing run defense, then you're just going to pass it 100% of the time until the defense adjusts. And then when they play only pass defense, you're just going to run it every single time, right? Like poker's that game where you have to recognize um, recognize what people are doing too much or not doing enough, and then make those adjustments along the way. And
Hmm.
learning poker is very complex, and then I guess that goes back to the execution part, where it's like when you study poker, you're given everything almost at like a baseline value, and that we have to use that tool to kind of we have to use that tool to go into the game and then execute and make adjustments on the fly all the time. And then that's really the other part of learning how to be a good poker player. But I guess to recap, um, to where you are now and to where your, I guess, journey has been, uh, kind of this poker journey that was started 6 years ago, 5 years ago.
5 years ago, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, I guess looking back to that person, the person that like was just kind of hit rock bottom. Like if you were talking to that person with your current self now, what advice would you give?
Hmm. That's a great question. What advice would I give myself? I don't know. Shit. I mean, like, there's part of me, like, the thought popped in my head of like, I wouldn't do anything different, you know?
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, I would, yeah, like, I would just tell that person, like, have faith, have hope, things
Mhm.
will get better. Don't give up. you know, be willing, keep an open mind, listen to others. Um, yeah, I don't know that I would give advice to do anything different. At least I don't have anything popping in my head. But
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
not,
it doesn't even have to be do anything different. I think what you said was perfectly good. I think like just having the faith and the hope and like keep moving forward, I guess is my advice to somebody. It's like just keep putting that step, keep
yeah.
walking the line.
The one thing that just now popped up, 'cause it's something that I do regularly now, and I like if you want to say advice or suggest other people do this now is celebrate everything.
Hmm.
Celebrate everything you do. Um, and I share this with other people like at the poker table, and it's funny. This just happened the other day, and I was kind of sharing this idea with some other people. I said, yeah, just celebrate. Like I went to the gym today. I did that.
Hmm.
And I was talking to this kid at the poker table. And I was like, what's something you did today that you can celebrate? He's like, yeah, I called this guy in the river for $600. I did that. And I said, yeah, and then, like just kind of turned to like other people, and like everybody at the table started saying something. Like the dealer even he's like, I did that. He didn't even say anything, but he said, I did that, and like we're all laughing and just having a good time, and it feels really good, and it then gives you like really clean motivation to do the next thing. So like
Yeah.
I'm at the Borgata and I wake up in the morning and I, kind of just have a little bit of quiet time. And then I go downstairs and I go to the gym and I come back up and I eat, and before I get ready, I just kind of say, all right, like I meditated this morning. I did that.
Hmm.
And, I texted my dad. I did that. And I had a really good workout. I did that. I start to feel really good. I'm ready to go play
Yeah.
poker, right? Like I don't need anything else. I just need to celebrate like what I've already done. And that could be something that might not be like cool or okay. You know what? Like, um, I plan to do like a high intensity training on interval and on the treadmill, and like I skipped that. Yeah, I did that. Like I didn't do that today, right? Like, or I wanted to eat really clean today, but I ate this food instead. Yeah, I did that, right? Like, just kind of celebrating, the things that we do. If I were going to give any advice to me a few years ago, it's like just make sure you celebrate everything, right? Like in the end of the day, like the experiences that we have is really, that's it. The experience that we have, no matter what we're doing. And like you said before, taking responsibility for poker decisions, taking responsibility for your life, the gratitude that you have that we get to play this game for a living, that we get to have relationships with other people. Celebrate that. This is what our life is about. We get to have this journey once, and we're all here together. So that's
I
how.
think that's very powerful. Yeah. And that goes into gratitude. So it's
Mm.
very well wrapped up. Just be grateful and keep moving forward. Yeah. Gratitude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
celebrate. See, so you know what? What did we do today? We sat down and did a podcast together. We did that.
Yeah. We did.
We did that.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, your whole journey. I hope some people find this motivating if someone's going through something similar. To know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. That,
Yeah.
things can get better, and for also sharing your poker story as well, your poker journey, and some of your insights there.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This has been great. I love to share my story, so giving me the opportunity to do that, I really appreciate that. And hanging out with you guys, this is fun.
Now you can have a beer to celebrate.
All
Yeah.
All right, Craig. It's been great talking, man.
right,
All
boys.
right.
Peace.
See ya.